But first of all, thank you everyone for being here. I know we had like a little rescheduling thing happen last week, so I appreciate that people were still able to make it out. Just to kind of say at the top, feel free to use the chat to chat, but if you're gonna ask any questions, please use the Q&A. It's a little bit easier to track. But yeah, so hello, I'm Maihan, I'm with the Help Network, and I'm here with Ajae Clearway, who has so many awesome credits and has worked on games and films, and people are already raising their hands for things. But we do have some questions that people have sent in advance, so we'll be asking that. But to start, Ajae, do you mind talking about yourself, what you do, kind of your role, and like how you kind of got there?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm not seeing anybody. Am I supposed to be seeing everyone?
No, it'll just be us on camera, but everyone's kind of like in the chat.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I started out in film as a sound editor and producer and director. And then I eventually, that was in New York and in Austin. And then when I came to LA, I started working in games, and I kind of brought all of my film background. I also used to be independent documentary filmmaker. So I kind of brought all my film experience into games. And so that's kind of been my specialty, is sort of bridging that world between kind of film production, TV production, and games, which there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of particularities. So I've been a little bit of a bridge between sort of the production world, and also particularly for actors and for the stage and for the developers, being that kind of person in between that can sort of translate both sides so that the experience is pretty seamless for the actors. And so my specialty has been working on AAA games on the mocap stage, so performance capture. And I've sort of seen it evolve and worked with different technologies and different teams, and kind of, you know, been doing it for over a decade now. So yeah, and now it's getting really big, and all the worlds are kind of merging with film and television, you know, using mocap in movies now. So all the worlds are kind of merging now, and the technology is being used for many different mediums.
Awesome. Did you kind of fall into this industry, or was it something that you like watched or experienced that made you want to get into this?
It was more by accident. I met a director who was doing this, and I had a lot of, you know, film production experience, and I just started doing it. So I wasn't a gamer necessarily, but yeah, I kind of fell into it, and then it's sort of taken over because it's so big now, and it's getting so popular now. Like I've still produced movies and commercials sometimes, but it's been a while because games have basically taken over, at least for me.
What are kind of some of the changes that you've seen in the past decade? Because you said that like there's new technology emerging. Anything that you've like witnessed or see where we're going?
For sure. I mean, face, for one thing, has gotten so much more high fidelity, and also everything's gone wireless, and it's just much easier. The helmet cameras are lighter, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I'm not sure what everyone's experience is here in the audience, but I'm sure you can see, at least you've seen on YouTube, if you haven't been on a mocap stage, you know, if you're doing full PCAP, which, you know, you probably know the difference. Mocap is basically the suit and capturing the physical body, but PCAP is considered full performance, where you have a helmet camera on that's capturing your facial movements and an audio and a mic. So you're basically doing full performance, not just the body. And so one of the things that's changed is the helmets. They're much lighter, they're much more manageable, so people can really move on the stage and really do a full performance. Whereas when they first started, they were wired and they were heavy and they were, you know, really difficult to work with. So just things like that. I mean, basically the technology's evolved, the fidelity has evolved. It's, you know, photoreal now. I mean, it's, you know, it's just, everything looks better, and the actual physical technology is more manageable. And yeah, and of course now they're going into markerless suits and all kinds of stuff. I haven't done that because it still doesn't quite, like the XN suits don't quite meet the needs of the kinds of games that I work on. But yeah, the technology is changing and getting better and better every year, every game.
Are you able to kind of go into like what exactly a performance capture showrunner does per project? I'm assuming it varies, but
it does vary in the sense of, when a team comes to you, depending on what their background is, how much experience they have with mocap and with narrative and what they're looking for. So yeah, so some teams are really experienced and they have writers and they have in-house producers, cinematic producers and animators, and there's a whole team, and that's one of the things I love about games is it's extremely collaborative. I mean, you're always working with an animation director, a creative director, game director. So there are a number of different directors. And so, when I come in as performance director or as producer, as a showrunner, I end up doing so many different things. I basically run the production team. So we kind of, from the beginning, we talk about, script and script development. And then once the script is at a place where it's production ready, we talk about the best way to go about organizing the shoots. And over many years, we've kind of developed that. And so some of the game teams are, very savvy, and they've done a lot of cinematics and using performance capture for their cinematics. And so they kind of understand the process. And, there's been a lot of trial and error. I mean, a lot of teams that are newer at it might want to approach it like a movie and shoot everything all at once. And that doesn't tend to be the best way to do it for games, because there's so many iterations and so many dependencies, and you have to have all the game design and the character design and lighting and all the things. And so generally the way it works better, in my experience, is to break it up into shoot blocks. So depending on how extensive the narrative is and how extensive the cinematics are, you might break it up into 3, 4, 5. Like on Jedi, I think we had eight shoots over a year and a half to 2 years, like 8 shoots of like 2 to 3 weeks each, with space in between. So they have time to iterate and animate and see how things are working, and then, go back and backtrack if we need to reshoot anything. Like, it really helps to have space in between and to do it over time, because that way we can really be prepared for each of the shoot blocks and actually have the design and have the things ready. Trying to have everything ready ahead of time, like you would need for a movie, is almost impossible on a game sort of pipeline.
How would you kind of compare doing productions work on a movie versus like a game? Like, how similar and how different are they?
I would say on a movie, all the roles are very strict and structured because they've been designed that way for the last 100+ years. And you do tend to try to do it all in one big block, right? A few months at a time, you knock the movie out and you're done with the production. So as I said before, like with games, we tend to do it over time in shoot blocks, and which allows you to kind of iterate, rewrite the script. Like, it allows you a little bit of course correction, which I think really helps, especially when there's, so much animation work. It takes so much time. You don't want to go too far in one direction if you're going to have to backtrack. So, and then on the production itself, movies take a lot more people. Like, you can be very efficient on a PCAP stage. Like, you really don't need as many people as you do on a movie set, which I think is good. And it also gives more people more opportunities, because you can jump around a little bit and do different things. Whereas on a movie set, it's very rigid and you have your job and that's all you do, and you're not supposed to do anything else. So I think what I like about games, what I really love about games, is how they are more collaborative and a little more flexible in terms of the roles, and they can be more efficient. You don't need as many people to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's really cool how, we've gotten to a place where technology has given us more of a freedom and more creativity. When you are working on like a performance capture project, do you notice that some actors kind of bring in certain skill sets that aren't necessarily acting or performance capture? I guess such as like combat training or anything like that?
Yeah, so depending on the project and what is required of it, we might bring in a stunt team. I definitely don't cast or expect the main performers to be stunt actors, because that's just not the expectation. If there are a lot of stunts, like on Jedi, we bring in a stunt team for that, and we have stunt doubles for that, and people who specialize in very specific things, whether it's martial arts or acrobatics or whatever. It's not expected that if you're coming in as the main performer in a certain role, that you would be also doing the stunts. That's not, in fact, I wouldn't want that, because they're really two different things and two different specialties. Not that some stunt actors aren't also actors, which there are definitely people that do both, but that's not expected. Although on the other hand, to be successful at performance capture, you do need to you need to move. You need to know how to move. You need to have, you need to know how to kind of land. If you have a dance background, if you have a theater background, like, it's very physical, it's very demanding. You don't sit like in your trailer for half the day, like often you might do on a film set. That's another big difference. And another big technical difference with films is like, there's a lot of changeover time with changing lighting and changing sets and all that. The changeovers in PCAP are a lot quicker. So you're on your feet a lot more. It's a lot more physically demanding. So yeah, if you have a theater background or a dance background or a martial arts background, that's all great, mostly because you just have to know how to move. But you're not going to be expected to be doing stunts. And in fact, we won't want you to be doing stunts unless you're hired specifically as a stunt performer.
How would you say, if someone had done exclusively voiceover, how would you kind of recommend them getting into performance capture?
A lot of voiceover agents are the ones that end up casting PCAP, or putting their people out for PCAP. So you just tell your voiceover agent that that's something you're interested in, for one, and then to be ready for the role. Like I said, just if you have that physical background, if you do theater, whatever, like those are the things that are going to set you apart. And on auditions, we want to see how you move, how you walk in the character. If the character requires holding a weapon, you need to know how to hold a weapon. Like, show your body, show how you move. Those are the things that we need to see. But as far as getting the audition, talk to your agent and say that you're interested in that.
Have you noticed kind of similar frustrations working from project to project, like working on like something like Wolfenstein and then Star Wars? You're noticing kind of a pattern that a lot of like PCAP performers are doing maybe like incorrectly, or an etiquette that they're lacking?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think, we cast very carefully, so we don't really have that. I mean, I honestly, like, most of the actors I work with are all great. And we've only had a few instances where we've had to replace people. And that, I mean, the technology is such, which is kind of amazing with PCAP, that you can actually replace someone because they're all, animated, and you can replace people, which is good and bad. But the only time we've ever had to do that is when someone really didn't understand the physical kind of demands of the job.
Gotcha. And in terms of that, like casting or recasting, how much does like height factor into things? Height, body shape, and all that stuff.
It just depends on the role.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it just depends on the role. I mean, if the character, I would say, on Jedi, it depends on the role. So of course, ideally for the animators, it's better for them if the actor is the size of the character. But of course, sometimes you have huge monsters and there's no human that's going to be as big as a huge monster, so there are ways around it. With eyeline, you can put like on the helmet, you can put kind of like an antenna with and then and the other actor who's working with the person who's supposed to be gigantic, they can look at something as their eyeline. I mean, there's ways around it. And there's no specific body type or age or gender or anything. It's really just depends on the character in the script. So I can't say like, this is the kind of person we're looking for, because it really just depends on the story and the script.
So that kind of opens up a little bit more freedom in casting, and you don't necessarily have to like look like the character. But something that also comes up often is that now we don't have to necessarily cast in LA or New York or anything like that because of like remote voiceover recording. Is there anything remote happening in like the performance capture world?
Well, I would say it started with the pandemic. I was on the stage throughout the pandemic, but the clients, many of whom were overseas, they tended to, because of flying and all the COVID restrictions and all that kind of stuff. So for me anyways, during the pandemic, we still worked on the stage. We had, we were following all of the SAG COVID protocols. So all the crew and all the stage crew and the developers, everybody that was on set was wearing a mask, and we all were COVID testing 3 times a week or more. But the actors on the stage, when they were actually being recorded, they would take their masks off, and then the clients, for the most part, would Zoom in if they were not local. And so we would be using streaming. And that continues to today. I mean, it's that I would say, as far as that goes, mostly the client would be streaming in, and that worked fine. I mean, it worked out okay. It's different than having people on stage with you, but people are doing it. So I'm sure, and I know there are other people where directors were actually directing from remotely as well, which I think is tricky, but people are doing it. So yeah, I mean, everybody was kind of adjusting as needed depending on the circumstances of the job.
Is it possible to do performance capture remotely at this stage?
Well, the actors have to be on the stage. I mean, you can do face, where I know there were a lot of actors ended up. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you listening are in the situation where a lot of actors are and set up home studios, and then also in some instances also putting on their own helmets and doing face capture. But aside from that, if you're actually doing performance capture, the actors have to be on the stage. I mean, the director can be elsewhere if necessary, the client can be elsewhere if necessary, but ultimately the tech crew and the actors have to be on the stage. And I mean, honestly, and you're going to get a better performance when the people are on the stage. I don't know, there isn't really any other way around that.
What are kind of some of the, maybe you're not able to get into specifics, but like these magical moments that you witness with seeing people kind of like act together on the stage?
Yeah, I mean, most of the games I work on are ensemble. Most of the games I work on, they're 6 to 12 actors, and we actually always prioritize rehearsal. We have a day of rehearsal for every 2 days of shooting, and that helps everyone. It helps the actors really develop the characters and develop the relationships before we have to actually start rolling cameras. It also helps the tech crew because then they kind of know where the actors are moving and blocking, and okay, we need to put this door over here, we need to change this, we need to change the height of this table or move this wall, or it helps everyone to kind of run through everything and know what to expect, so that on the day of the shoot everything is ready and everyone knows what to expect and what's going to happen in each scene. So I guess that's kind of a luxury, because not every production does prioritize that, but on the productions that I work on, we rehearse and then rehearse 1 day and shoot 2 days, and that really, in the end, I think helps the performance and also helps with efficiency ultimately, because otherwise you're figuring things out on the day with the actors there, and that's never a good thing.
Do you have experience doing performance capture yourself, and how do you kind of bring that into directing or showrunning?
I'm not an actor. I've never been an actor. I've trained as a director. I've worked with actors a lot, and my whole career, even producing and directing, has always been to prioritize the actor experience. I'm very much an advocate for actors and for stunt people, but I'm not an actor myself. But I will say that I spend many, many tedious hours figuring out the best approach to shooting and to each day, thinking about the emotional arcs, thinking about timing, thinking about, okay, what's the experience going to be between these characters and what makes sense to do on this day. And then of course you have to take into consideration sets and props and okay, well, changeovers. And, I sort of think about it foremost from the actor perspective of what is the day going to be like for them? What's the week going to be like for them? Kind of try to balance out emotional scenes and bigger scenes. And if it's a big ensemble, then we have, do the bigger scenes earlier in the day, and then the quieter scenes when there are fewer people left in the day. And also not too many emotional scenes in one day and not too much dialogue in one day, kind of mix up action with dialogue so that it's a balance. And so there's so many things to think about in terms of, basically creating an environment that will allow everyone to do their best work. So I'm not an actor. I've never been an actor, but I am very much an advocate for actors. And I think, I love actors, and I think, we get the best performances when we create a space that everybody can do their best work.
With constant changes and kind of like adjusting with like props and stage and people coming in and maybe having to like reschedule, what would you say is the most difficult part of your job?
I would just say, and this is true probably of any kind of production, film production, whatever, it's sort of the unknowns. It's like you plan and you plan and you plan meticulously, and then things happen and you have to just be ready for that. And I mean, part of that is a good thing. You want to be spontaneous. You want to plan everything you possibly can so that you have the freedom to be spontaneous on the day and be creative. But I would just say I've had situations where, an actor is booked on like 3 other jobs, and then at the very last minute, they, are not available, even though they're, booked and committed to the job. So having to reschedule in the middle of a huge production that impacts, one actor all of a sudden can't show up, and that impacts, 12 other actors, and you have to basically reschedule a huge ensemble shoot because one actor decided to flake out, or they decided a movie was more important. I mean, that's the problem. It's like games, I think, are finally getting a little more respect, but I would say that, many actors still prioritize movies over games because they just feel like they have more clout or whatever. And sometimes we get the short end of the stick because of it. And there's more than once I've had to reschedule a shoot in the middle of it, which is not easy, as you can imagine.
How long, or like in the process, are you involved in the process of like looking at auditions and kind of like going through of casting? How long in advance would people receive like their scripts to kind of memorize?
For auditions or for the shoot?
Can you speak on both?
Yes. Well, again, it depends on the game team and how experienced they are. Best practices for a shoot, at least 2 weeks in advance. And if it's a full script, like a whole, basically feature length script, ideally much earlier than that, or, a few months before. Maybe it won't be the final version of the script, but some version of the script a few months before, and then kind of the more production ready script, at least for the shoot block, right? So as I said before, it's usually broken up. We're not going to, do an entire feature script in one block. So if it's a lead actor, they should have a full script, at least in some form, even if it's not final, a few months before, and then 2 weeks before for each shoot block. However, that's best practices. I can't say that's what happens for everybody. I mean, some people, and depending on who they're working with, they might not get the script till the day of, and they have, you know what I mean? It's like, I try not to ever work that way, and that's definitely not ideal for anyone, but 2 weeks is manageable for everyone. And then for auditioning, maybe a week, maybe, about the same, but you have less context for that.
Do you have any tips on kind of like submitting like a self-tape for PCAP?
Yeah, show your whole body. Like wear clothes where you can see your physical body, wear like aerobic clothes or whatever, or dress like the character, but don't overdo it trying to be the character, because your interpretation of the character might not be right if you don't have any context for it. But yeah, show your whole body, how you move, how you walk in character. If you're supposed to be holding a weapon, include that and show that you can hold the weapon. Show us what we need to see. Like, if you were this character and you were moving in the space, we need to know what that looks like.
Based on your experience working for a lot of recent games, what kind of technology would you kind of like to see in future projects? Or I guess what would make kind of like things a little bit easier? Because I know you said that a lot of the equipment is getting lighter, and I'm sure that's like a lot more, it's like getting easier for like the actors to put that on. But is there any kind of like wish list items that you would like to see happen?
Interesting. I mean, it's already happening. It's already happening. Just everything is getting quicker, faster, better real time, where you can really see the physical movements that are happening in the moment in real time. Environments. I mean, it's just getting better and better. It's already happening. Like technique. I don't have complaints about the tech. I guess in general, it's only getting better. And it's more for the actors, I think, you know, comfort level, because it's not, you know, it's kind of total freedom, but also for some, it's, you know, basically you're wearing a black suit it kind of just creates a void where it's all about your imagination. You know, you don't get to wear a costume, you don't get to wear, you know, it's all imagination, right? Because the sets are just kind of basic structures. So all the things you have to fill in with your imagination. And that's kind of the beauty of it, but also the challenge of it. But yeah, I don't really have complaints. I mean, I think, you know, things take time. I mean, I guess, you know, if I could put a wish list out there tech wise that, you know, all the ROMs and all the things might go faster. I mean, because it takes time. It takes a couple hours to get the actors ready in the morning, right? So you put on the suit, you have to get your markers put on, they all have to get checked. Each actor individually has to go through a series of, you know, ROMs, which are basically just physical movements, getting yourself calibrated into the system. Then your face, the makeup takes time. I mean, everything takes time. It takes, you know, it's a good chunk of the day. If you have 6 to 10 actors, it takes a solid couple hours in the morning just to get everybody into the system, in their suits, ready to go. So that's a big chunk of the day. So sure, I mean, I guess if I was, you know, wishing on a star, I would say that could be a more efficient, easier process. But all the tech people are great and they make it go as fast as it's possible to go. But yeah, I mean, that's just part of it.
Do you kind of have an estimate of how long it takes for one person to get calibrated?
It really depends on the stage. It really depends on the system. It depends on if they're doing face markers or not. Every stage is different. I mean, there's different mocap systems. There's the Lightstorm system and the Vicon system. There's different suits. There's different marker sets, like different development teams require different markers in different places. They also have different ROM sets. So they have different physical movements, different facial movements, facial ROMs. There's no one answer to that question because every team has different requirements for their animators. So some teams, you know, it's super quick and some teams it's not. It just depends what their needs are.
So
but that's actually something really important to establish. If you are a showrunner or a producer, you know, talking to the team about like what their needs are in terms of that, because that really makes a huge difference in planning the day.
No, yeah, that makes sense that you're kind of like in the forefront of like having to kind of like know and kind of figure out ahead of time like how long everything's going to take just to make the process run smoothly. For someone who is completely new to performance capture and say they got booked on the job and they're going in and suited up, what kind of advice would you give them in terms of like handling equipment if they've never done that before? Is there something that they can do at home to kind of just figure out how to use like the gear, or is it just like simply just talking to people, watching videos?
I mean, depending on what the character is supposed to be doing, you could definitely, I mean, you asked earlier about height and all of that stuff. I'll give you an example from Jedi. So the character of Grease was played by somebody who was very tall, and the character of Grease is very short. So he had to put a sticker basically on his chest that was the eye line for Cal, because the character was that much smaller than he actually was. And so, and he also had to put like foam under his arms because he had 4 arms, you know, he had 4 arms. So like basically it was sort of creating space for the 2 underneath arms. So things like that, like if you have a special situation, like if you were the character of Grease, you would practice at home, you know, walking around with foam under your arms and get used to your arms being kind of sticking out. You know what I mean? Things like that. Like it really depends on the character, but there are things like that you would probably practice just as an actor, whether it was for PCAP or for something else. I mean, you know, PCAP is sort of like, you just have to do it once and then you get an idea of what it is. You put the helmet on. I mean, if you're there on a rehearsal day and you have the opportunity to put the helmet on and see what that feels like and rehearse a little bit with the helmet on, then do that. Yeah, anything you can do to kind of simulate what that feels like to wear the helmet, wear the suit. But yeah, once you do it once, it's sort of like, it makes sense.
So how do you feel about this statement? Quote, you should have the body movements of theater, the facial movements of TV, the voice volume for film. How much of that is true or not true, would you say?
I mean, I guess that's mostly true. It's just, it's sort of, again, it's always on a case by case basis, I would say. But yeah, I mean, you can think of it that way. I mean, most of the time actors will be mic'd with lav mics, so the mic is right up close. You don't have to be extra loud. You let the sound mixer and sound engineer worry about that. And yeah, I mean, you are being captured from every direction. So yeah, I mean, it's in that sense, it is like theater where you're not playing to one camera, generally speaking, unless there's a virtual camera where you're trying to get a very specific camera move. In that case, you are kind of playing to one camera, but in general, you're being captured, 360. And so, yeah, you do have to think about your whole, acting with your whole body. But I guess I just wouldn't compartmentalize it quite that much, because you want to just perform and do, give it, be in character and give it the best performance. But sure, I mean, that more or less that is correct.
So this question is, I've noticed many characters have to hold their arms open wide in every shot due to huge weapon belts. I'm curious if that is something the actor needs to think about. We were kind of talking about that with Grease and how, kind of like thinking about walking with foam under his arms. So I guess to kind of rephrase the question, are there any other stories that you can provide that's similar to like how the actor had to wear foam under his arms to adjust for that? Is there any kind of like adjustments that you've noticed?
Well, in Wolfenstein, one of the leads had to have a pregnancy belly, right? And so we had that under her suit. And so one of the things, we made sure she always did her makeup before we put her in the suit, so she didn't have to sit in the makeup chair with this giant pregnancy belly in the way. But it really just depends on the character. I mean, I think it's just like any kind of acting, like there's no one answer, and it's not like, don't think, I mean, performance capture is a medium, it's not, it's just another technology. So acting is acting is acting. It depends on the character. Everything depends on the character. There's no particular thing you have to do differently because you're putting on a mocap suit. You just need to do, focus on your character, learn your character. And but as far, I wouldn't think about performance capture as something other than performance. Like it's whatever the character needs to be doing is what you need to be doing.
How would you assess a physically disabled actor's performance towards casting? How much does that play a part? Would you base their capabilities from their demos and auditions, or just how well they can move as a character?
It's the same thing. It's whatever the character is. If that fits for the character, then that's no problem.
That makes sense. What's your favorite part about being a showrunner?
Getting to work with great people over and over again. I tend to work with a lot of the same people over and over again. And, it's a nice small group of people, and everybody, I love the collaboration. I love that people want to be there. You know what I mean? It's like the people that are successful on the mocap stage are people that are excited to collaborate. They're excited to be a part of it. They're willing to kind of do whatever it takes. Actors, prima donna actors don't tend to do very well on the mocap stage because, a lot of times we ask people to play more than one role. Like, oh, hey, you're doing this thing over here, but do you mind, running over here and doing this background thing, being this other person all of a sudden, like switching gears? Like, we ask a lot of people, and, most of the actors are great. They're like, sure, I'd love to get to play another role. I'd love to get to do that. And, what I love is that, people step up. They're willing to do whatever it takes, and they enjoy it. Like a lot of the actors who haven't done mocap before, they're just like, wow, this is so cool. They've been doing movies for so many years, and they finally get to do something different, like something fresh, and it's fun. And it's fun to work with actors who really enjoy what they do. And most people who work in mocap really enjoy it.
No, that's awesome. It's kind of like you kind of absorb that passion as well. What, as a performance capture director and showrunner and all the amazing things that you do, what's probably like the most important quality that you have brought in your projects that you would recommend other people kind of adapt to?
Just say a deep commitment to a really deep commitment to the story and just to the bigger picture. I think, you know, it's easy to get caught up in all the tech details, and it's easy to, you know, there's so many different people focused on different things. And it's just, you know, the bigger picture, like, is this serving the story? Are we all serving the story here? You know, the kind of, because, you know, we can get caught up in these long conversations and going down the rabbit hole, and, you know, sort of like backing up and just being like, okay, are we serving the story? Are we serving the game? Are we, you know, just really doing that? Because I mean, sometimes there's so many people involved, so many people, and you know, we all have to ultimately make the same game.
Do you recommend performance capture actors to kind of understand like the animation process and maybe like the programming and things like that as well, or how much does that matter?
It depends on the person. I think honestly, if you're an actor and your job is to be an actor, focus on your character. You know what I mean? Like, that's, you know, a lot of actors get really distracted by real time. Like, they see their character up on the screen and they start dancing. And I mean, that's fun sometimes, but it's also can be really distracting. So it's like, if you're acting, like, focus on your acting and on the character. If you're someone who is genuinely interested in the tech and you want to understand how things work, and you know, aren't just acting, you're also interested in working on the stage or whatever, I mean, it's great that you're curious, and it's, you know, it's, I'm not saying don't learn about it. I think that, you know, I think the more you know, the knowledge is always a good thing. But if you're there to play a certain character, focus on that. Like, you can get so distracted by so many other things. It's really easy to do. You know, if you're there to be an actor, focus on your role. And then if you're there for something else, like, more power to you, learn about the tech, you know, volunteer on the stage or whatever. But if you're there to perform, like, focus on your job.
What are some of your favorite projects that you've worked on, and why? Is this what this question is asking?
Well, Jedi definitely was probably a, you know, a really huge, really special one, because we were kind of breaking new ground. We were working as a team for the first time. It was, you know, Respawn was kind of, it was their first big IP. And also it was the first time I was working with Darren Ross, who has now become a close friend and stunt coordinator on almost everything I work on. And so, and we did, you know, we were really kind of discovering a process. And like here, and so we, you know, a lot of times stunts are kind of relegated to a separate thing, and they don't really get involved in the creative side, and they don't really get involved in the narrative. And we kind of took the exact opposite approach on Jedi. We're like, okay, the stunt team is part of the team. The stunt team is part of the creative process. And it was amazing because we, you know, because so many of the scenes, and also, you know, the Respawn team did such a good job of integrating the narrative with the gameplay. It was like so seamless. And that was also partially due to the stunts being so seamless. So we, you know, for example, with the Ninth Sister, that role, that character was created by two different people, by Misty Lee, who did the face and the voice, and by TJ Storm, who did the body. And the two of them together, because the character was supposed to be really, really tall. So TJ kind of had the height, and then Misty had the face and the voice. They collaborated so beautifully together. And TJ is also a stunt actor. So they would move together side by side. They created that character together, and we would, on the stage, we'd have the stunt actors with the main actors, and the main actors would be doing the face, and the stunt actors would be doing the body, and they'd be working side by side. And the scenes were so seamless because it would go back and forth between dialogue and stunts and dialogue and stunts. And it would be so much harder to totally separate out stunts, which is often done. It's like, okay, we'll do stunts on this day and we'll do the narrative on that day. But the scenes were so integrated with stunts that it just made sense to kind of have everybody working together and figuring it out together and shooting it side by side, which we did. And it was a really amazing process.
You said that you don't necessarily play games yourself. Do you kind of, you know, look for like all the scenes and kind of like watch it, have like a movie night? Like, how do you kind of like enjoy your own work?
Well, I did play Jedi.
Oh, okay.
And And I have a 10-year-old, so I was happy to be able to play something with him because it wasn't as gory as some of the other games I've worked on. So, but I, of course, every cinematic I've ever worked on, I certainly watch it on YouTube and I see how it comes out and all of that. If I'm not physically playing the game, I always watch the cinematics that we do. But I do actually like playing games. I'm just not great at it. But I'm happy to now have some games that are not so gory that I can actually play with my son.
That's awesome because it's like another bonding thing. And like, do you ever tell your son like, oh, like stories as he's playing?
Yeah, he's been on the stage with me. He's like,
okay,
he likes to play around with the stunt team, and he definitely knows what's going on. And of course, all these games are super, super highly confidential. They all have code names. You're not allowed to talk about them until they come out, all this stuff. And so I don't even tell my family what I'm working on. I just tell them the code name, but he always comes in and he always figures it out. He just like watches me for 5 minutes working at home and he's like, I know what you're working on. I'm like,
no, you don't. That's awesome. Is there anything that you've seen that you were like surprised happened in the final product that you weren't expecting when you were kind of like working it on the stage?
Well, I don't want to be negative, but I will say usually it's disappointing when things get cut out or when you don't get to see like the full, like what the performance was on stage, and then in the final product, if it doesn't show it to the same degree, especially with the stunts, a lot of times you don't get to see all the detail. And so I don't want to be negative, but sometimes it's like, oh, what happened to that? But
if only there was like a
most of the time it's great, but some of the time you're like, wait a minute, what happened to that scene?
That's so funny. So this person would like to know, I'm in a Los Angeles local and was wondering where you might suggest taking a PCAP classes. I don't know, do you have any recommendations on teachers? I know TJ Storm teaches and
he does. Yeah, Victoria Atkin for sure. She does online stuff. She's got that Facebook group, weekly workouts, VO and PCAP, and she does stuff all the time, like ongoing workshops, and she's great. Like she's amazing, and she's actively working on tons of games, and she's a great teacher. So I would recommend Victoria for sure.
What are other markets besides Los Angeles, if you've noticed any, for performance capture?
I mean, there are stages all over the world. I've worked in Stockholm, Eckerby, Kansas, quite a bit. There are stages all over the world. So really, like, there's not, and people go all over the world. I would say we tend to shoot wherever the actors are. So if the game requires, people from the US, we tend to shoot in the US. If it requires Europeans, we tend to shoot in Sweden or somewhere in Europe. So it's sort of like most of the time it makes sense to shoot where the actors are based on what the story is and where the characters are from.
What's kind of your favorite like travel moments, if like in world building and things like that? Because like something like God of War is coming out, and I know like the team kind of like and like researched like mountainous areas and snowy areas. Like, do you get the opportunity to kind of like do that and reimagine the stage? Any kind of like magical moments like that?
I'm not usually involved at that very concept level. I fortunately get to work with the developers and they sort of share that with me. I tend to not be involved quite that early. Usually I come in when there's a script and they at least have most of that concept worked out, but I'm always blown away by it. It's always so exciting and amazing. But that's not really my area, because I usually come in once that's sort of already been established.
Do you have kind of like an opinion on like the different genres of your projects? Like if there's like a sci-fi one, a fantasy one, like how different, how similar? Do you like one over the other?
Just good stories. It can be any world, any time, any place. It's just, it comes down to good stories and good characters. I think that's true of all mediums. Like it really, that's what it comes down to, because people are going to connect to the characters, people are going to connect to the story, and it's yeah, I wouldn't say there's one over another that I prefer. I think I connect to good characters and good stories, and I like working with people who are really committed to that, and that can be in any world, really.
What's some of your like most favorite characters that you've connected with?
Let's see. Well, some of the characters in Wolfenstein for sure, because that ensemble was, Deborah Wilson. I mean, she's so brilliant, and she plays so many different characters, but her character in Wolfenstein was really powerful. Gosh, so many. But yeah, it's more about the group energy. I think it's more about the ensemble and everybody's character working together that makes it so special. But yeah, I mean, working with people like Deborah is just, it's a dream, she's so committed and loves what she does, and such an amazing human.
For actors who are interested in performance captures, is there something that Deborah does specifically that you're just like, oh, I wish everyone kind of knew this tip?
She's always prepared. She gives so much. She listens. She's always present. I mean, I know other actors love to work with her because she's fully present, and she really commits 100%, 150% to every role. And then just as a human, she just happens to be a lovely person who like makes necklaces for everybody on set every time. And like, she's just a good human. I don't know what to say. Like, she's a pleasure to work with because, she wants to be there, and she's so grateful. And so, one of her sayings is, too grateful to be hateful, too blessed to be stressed. Like, she's just this positive energy, so working with people who have positive energy and who want to contribute and be creative together and do the best work, and just, I mean, it's a joy to work with people like that who just really are all in.
That's awesome. Again, it's like that passion and just kind of being contagious for everyone. Someone said, you touched on this a bit earlier, but in your experience, is there a range of body types represented in casting? I ask as a 5'5" short king surrounded by giant adult-sized men.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, there is no limit in PCAP to what your body can look like. I mean, as long as you can move your body, it's just based on the characters. It's only limited by what the writers do. It's not limited by anything else. We've had all kinds of body types and all ages, all body types, from like age 8 to age 80. I mean, really, like, anybody can be on the PCAP stage. There's no limits to that. It's only limited by what's written in the script.
And for anyone who's interested on the show running and directing side, do you have any kind of advice for that?
Well, what I had said about actors before, where like they should focus on acting, I would say if you're interested in producing, directing, show running, like, then I would say the opposite is true. You should get as much technical knowledge as you possibly can, understand what every single person on that stage is doing, from the mocap tech to the real-time tech to the sound people to, I mean, learn the tech. Like, you don't have to necessarily be an expert at it, but understand what everybody's doing, understand what the parameters are, like, spend some time on a stage, work on a stage, like, learn all the roles, so that you can actually manage everybody. Like, if you're coming in, you need to at least understand what everybody's doing so that you can be a good manager, because you're essentially managing everybody. So you need to know what everybody's doing, and you need to appreciate every single person's effort, because people work really hard and really long, and get to know people, learn people's names, spend time on a stage, even if it means volunteering. There are plenty of stages that are, that definitely are open to, interns and to, entry-level positions. Like, you have to know something to have something to offer.
What are some of your favorite like movies or games that you have not worked on that has really resonated with you and like influenced you?
let's see. Games or movies, or games in particular, or?
Both. Just
Okay.
because you know, your background in both film and games, just wondering if there was any piece of media that, you know, kind of inspires you.
Yeah, I mean, so many things, but I mean, I'm kind of old school. I like movies from the 70s, like Hal Ashby, and you know, I'm very old school. So I like intimate stories. I really do. And so, you know, of course, everyone will say The Last of Us, but of course that one is, you know, it's an intimate story. And I think those are the kinds of stories that move people. And that's what I'm interested in.
Is there anything that you are excited for that's coming up that I'm assuming you can't talk about the stuff that you're working on, but anything that you're not working on that you're excited for?
Yes, I mean, I can't say what I'm working on now, but I will say that I'm very excited about something that I'm working on now. I'm excited about the change in the industry, that there's more openings for women and people of color, queer people. I'm just excited about the direction things are going. I mean, even though a lot of game teams are, you know, still learning, trying, you know, they're like, oh, you know, we want to have a non-binary character. You know, I think it's, you know, there's a huge space now for learning. And I think, you know, some of it is just, you know, trying to tick the boxes, but, you know, well, like the Health Network is a perfect example of like really trying to make real change. And that's exciting to me because I think that's going to make a huge difference. There's going to be all kinds of new stories being told, new perspectives, and it's time for sure.
Yeah, I think like the world is kind of getting bigger and bigger the more we kind of like open ourselves to it. So that's like really cool and really exciting that you are someone who's like on board with that too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've actually been lucky. I mean, I will say that a lot of the games I've worked on have been very diverse from the beginning. So I've been lucky in that way. Like I've worked with teams that have been interested in that and wanted that. But I know that's not always the case, and I'm glad that's changing.
Yeah, for sure. As we kind of approach the hour, if anyone has any final questions, go ahead and type that in. But I do want to ask AJ if there is if you can talk to your younger self or the person you were before you kind of got into this industry, what would you tell them?
I would say don't set arbitrary goals. Like I have to do this thing by this time or I won't feel successful, you know. I would just say keep learning, keep working with people that you like to work with. And don't worry so much about your title. Don't worry so much about exactly what your role is. Just keep learning and keep working hard and showing people what you can do and being honest with yourself about what you're good at and what you enjoy. And, you know, if you keep doing that, you'll find your way. And there is no one way. Like there's really no one way. And just keep working hard and don't give up and trust yourself. Like if the situation doesn't feel right, don't stay. And if you're working with people you like, but you don't, it's not your dream job, but you like the people and you're learning, then just, you know, keep doing that. Like there's no one path, and don't set arbitrary goals for yourself that are just going to set yourself up for failure. Like just keep working.
That's awesome. A lot of people in chat are saying that they love that so much. See, debating on moving out to LA, what can I do to market myself in the meantime, and general next steps?
Yeah, I mean, no matter where you are, right? Especially now with Zoom, you can take classes, keep educating yourself, like take classes online. I mean, and now more than ever, it doesn't really matter where you are. Like you know, read, study, you know, take classes, like just keep doing the work. Like wherever you are, do what you can do in that place, in that time, you know, go work on a play, go be in a play, like whatever is available to you, use those resources.
is there any final words you'd like to offer, either for actors, for directors, for people who, love games, anything at all?
I would just say there's room for everybody. Like games are exploding. This technology is exploding. There is so much need for all kinds of skills. And if this is what you want to do, you'll find a way to do it. I mean, believe me, there's so much. There's so much out there. Like, you will find your place.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time and just chatting and just sharing your passion for everything. It's been really awesome for me to hear, and then I'm sure everyone also who's here is really, really, really affected by your words. Are you online anywhere? People can kind of keep tabs on what you're working on?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Yeah. I mean, right. I'm not hard to find.
Just a Google away.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for today, and for rescheduling. And
thanks everybody for coming back. Sorry we missed you last weekend, and sorry I can't see your faces. I would say hi if I could see your faces, but I can't see any of your faces.
Next one we'll have everyone kind of just chat.
Anyway, thanks for coming, everybody, and I'm looking in the chat now just to see more or less who's here. Hi.
I know Walt's in here.
Hi, Walt. Nice to sort of not see you, but see you.
We should do a kind of like a chat and coffee drink sort of online meeting.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody coming.
But yeah, so thank you everyone again. Thank you, AJ. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.